Hi everyone. So I haven't been making any videos lately because I've been extremely busy, but this morning I was half asleep and this thought came to me, and it seems to be when all thoughts I have come to me when I'm half asleep, because perhaps the best thoughts I have aren't actually my own. I don't know that I have any good thoughts at all. I'm not a highly educated person or anyone who's been brilliant in anything really in their life, but sometimes you just get ideas that you have to chase down that rabbit hole. So here we go. So the thought that came to me was about light and the pyramid light, that it shines through a pyramid, like this image here, which is similar to the image that's used on the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon album, and the chakra rainbow that is represented in the 7 chakras as depicted in this picture. Are you a rainbow bridge? The alternative esoteric Babylonian mystery religions ask. And I would have to say no, we are not a rainbow bridge, or we are not a Jacob's ladder to heaven, because Jesus tells us in John 8 verse 12, I am the light of the world. Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So in John 12 verse 30 to 36, Jesus answered and said, this voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. The people answered him, we have heard out of the law that Christ abideth forever. And how sayest thou, the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? Jesus said unto them, yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while ye have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. While ye have light, be in the light, that ye may be the children of light. These things spake Jesus, and departed, and did hide himself from them. So there's a lot packed into this verse that I want to break down. First of all, Jesus says that the prince of this world will be cast out. Now, I haven't finished my series on Satan yet, but what I'm alluding to in that series is that not the serpent, perhaps not Satan, but Lucifer is man. It is man lifting himself up to heaven. And there is an element to man that is the serpent. We have this in Jesus telling the Pharisees that they are the seed of Cain. They are the serpent seed. They are the children of Cain. And there's also that philosophy that Cain was the son of the serpent. That's not provable. But whatever he was referred to as the seed of the serpent. Jesus was depicted as the brazen serpent lifted up on the stake that Moses put in the wilderness for the Israelites. Jesus being lifted up, as he says here, for the healing of men, as the serpent, the brazen serpent, was lifted up for the healing of the Israelites. Was Jesus the serpent? No, but Jesus was a fleshly body, and Jesus had to be challenged by that fleshly body in the wilderness himself. You know, we see Jesus in the wilderness at his weakest point. He hasn't had food for, a long time, 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. And his body is at a very vulnerable, weak point where he is easily tempted by Satan. If you want to believe that was Satan, the entity, the serpent, or it's possible that it was just the self, the flesh of Jesus tempting himself. And I don't deny that either one could be the right story. As I've said before, Jesus was tempted just like Eve was by the serpent in the tree. And here in this depiction here, it's saying the same thing, that Jesus was tempted by the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And, you know, the lust of the flesh for Jesus at that time was he was hungry. He needed food, and Satan tempted him to make bread from rocks. And then the lust of the eyes, you know, he was offered the kingdoms of the world, of the earth, and Satan, or the angel, took him up to the top of the temple and tempted him to put God to the test and throw himself off so that the angels might rescue him. But all of these things that Satan tempted Jesus with were Jesus's in the first place. So, you know, he could have taken pride in his flesh and in himself, in the flesh and in the body, and he could have taken all these things without going through with the plan of God, but he was obedient to God. We are all challenged, and we all must put to death our flesh, because our flesh has something in it that is an adversary to us. All of us, none of us are perfect. All of us have to battle these fleshly desires, if you want to put it that way, the things that come to us that are an adversary to the spirit. The spirit is born, we are quickened in the spirit, and our flesh is an adversary to this. And the Apostle Paul talks a lot about that. So Jesus was the first spirit-born man in a body who overcame that, and who was sinless, and who rose again. And he was the first fruits of us all. And he was the light of the world. Yet a little while the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. While you have the light, believe in the light, and ye may be the children of light. These things spake Jesus. In verse 32 here he says, and I be lifted up from the earth, will draw men unto me. What does that sound like to me? That reminds me of Jacob's ladder. Genesis 28:12. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascended and descending on it. So we'll go to the version with Strong's Concordance, 28:12. And I just want to see the translation of angels. A messenger of God, an angel. So Strong's 4397. Malak, a messenger of God, an angel. Ambassador, king, angel, king, messenger. From an unused root meaning to dispatch as a deputy, a messenger, specifically of God, i.e. angel, also a prophet, priest, or teacher. Now, aren't we kings and priests? Or messengers, ambassadors for God? So, I'm not saying that angels, in the modern sense that we see them, aren't real. I'm not saying that at all. I think they are very real, but you know, also, we as believers could be called angels or messengers of God. The family of God can be called angels. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 and 2, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So going back to Genesis and Jacob and his dream, and behold, a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Jesus was the son of, or the heir of Jacob and Abraham. He was this ladder that was set up on earth for the angels of God, or the messengers, the kings, the priests, to reach heaven, to ascend to heaven, and also to descend to heaven. And we see in Revelation that fulfilled in the New Jerusalem being brought to earth, heaven on earth, descending to earth. And I believe that in near-death experiences, we see people ascending to heaven before that new city comes down to earth. All of this is made possible because of Jesus, because Jesus is the light of the earth. Now, when we look at this ladder to heaven, this is a ladder that is reached by our own effort. This ladder here is a light bridge to heaven. Or is it to heaven? I don't think it's to heaven personally, because Jesus tells us in John 10, verse 1 to 3, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, that he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out." So why is Jacob's ladder the central teaching of Freemasonry? And here we have all of these Freemasonic pictures here depicting Jacob's ladder as the third pillar, or the central pillar, the Lucifer eye, the Inanna star, and also the planet Venus. Apparently, they're saying that being this third pillar is the way to heaven. And when we look into the Talmudic teaching of how you become that ladder to heaven, or that Jacob's ladder, just as the New Age teachings teach, this is through the chakras, or the Kabbalistic system. Now, that Kabbalistic Talmudic system teaches that you have to be Adam Cadmon, which is a transgender Baphomet god. That you are the god. Here we have it here, the Kabbalah symbol. The chakras, the ladder to heaven. And it's telling us here, it's possibly DNA. This is an ancient, I think it's an Assyrian symbol. Perhaps it's Persian. This is the serpent, the DNA, the serpent in the tree, perhaps. People have said this before. And the tree of life, or is it the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the body, the human body, the Lucifer system. Because we have this adversary in our flesh. We're told this from the beginning. Once Adam and Eve sinned, it took Jesus to become the ladder to heaven, to reunite us with God. But what they're telling us through Freemasonry, through New Age mystery religion, is that we can become our own gods, and we can reach heaven through this Kabbalistic system. Anyone who preaches the New Age system, whether they know it or not, is teaching mystery religion and the Kabbalah. Here we have an image of a Vedic or Buddhist, perhaps even Hindu image of the chakras, and the left side is the sun, the right side is the moon. This is the three pillars of Freemasonry. The mother is the moon, the father is the sun, the child is the God-man, Lucifer, and obviously the sun father would be Adam, the moon mother, and the combination of the two is the child. The rotting of that teaching is that that child is both male and female, or the Adam Cadmon, the transgender Baphomet. Here we have a tarot card depicting Baphomet, or the devil as they call him, and it's explaining it visually exactly what I've said. We have Adam here, we have Eve here, and we have in the middle this Baphomet devil creature with this serpent phallic symbol where his first chakra starts. The Kepha chakra is the pentagram or the star of Venus. This is exactly what Freemasonry is depicting. We have the sun pillar, Boaz and Jacob pillars, moon pillar, and in the middle we have God or the pentagram, and Lucifer is the eye. The third pillar is the Jacob's ladder to heaven. Depicted here in this Freemasonic picture of Jacob's dream of the ladder to heaven as being the third pillar of Freemasonry, or Baphomet, or Lucifer in other words, and that Lucifer is the initiate into Freemasonry. I don't know anything about Freemasonry. I've learned this from their symbolism and obviously what other people have shared online. When we go into the Talmudic teaching, we have in the Kabbalah and the Talmud as well, Adam Cadmon, primordial man, also Adam Elion, supreme man, is the first of four worlds that come into being after the contraction of God's infinite light. Adam Cadmon is not the same as the physical Adam HaRishon, so the first, the Adam that we know of. So it came into being after the contraction of God's infinite light. All right, we have this: are you a rainbow bridge? Are you a light being? Are you an Adam Cadmon? So in Luranic Kabbalah, the description of Adam Cadmon is anthropomorphic. Nonetheless, Adam Cadmon is divine light without vessels, pure potential in the human psyche. Adam Cadmon corresponds to the Yeshida, the collective essence of the soul. In many religions, the philosophical traditions, there is a belief that a soul is the immaterial aspect of essence of a human being. Anthropomorphic Kabbalah, the central system in Jewish mysticism, uses anthropomorphic mythic symbols to metaphorically describe manifestations of God in Judaism based on the verse, God created man in his own image, and the image of God created he him, male and female created them. Kabbalah uses the form of the human body to describe the structure of the human soul and the nature of supernal divine emanations. A particular concern of Kabbalah is sexual unity between male and female potencies of divinity on high, depicted as interaction of two sides of the Sephirot, divine anthropes, between archetypal Partsifim, divine personas, and the redemption of the exiled Shekinah, feminine divine presence, from captivity among the impure forces below. So in Ginsberg's The Legend of the Jews, Volume 1, From the Creation to Jacob, Chapter 1, The Creation of the World. In the beginning, 2,000 years before the heaven and earth, 7 things were created. The Torah, written with black fire on white fire, and laying in the lap of God. The divine throne erected in the heaven, which later was over the heads of Hayot. Paradise on the right side of God, hell on the left side of God. The celestial sanctuary directly in front of God, having a jewel on its altar graven with the name of the Messiah. The name of their Messiah is Metatron, and a voice that cries aloud, "Return, you children of men." Is it possible that's what this image is depicting from Freemasonry? We've got Torah written with black fire on white fire, the black and white pillar tiles here. Now we have this Baphomet depicted here with the moon, the light moon, the dark moon, heaven, light, hell, darkness, the black sun, the bright sun, the black sun being Saturn. Is this what these images are depicting from the Talmud. When God resolved upon the creation of the world, he took counsel with the Torah. Her advice was this: O Lord, a king without an army and without courtiers and attendants hardly deserves the name of king, for none is high to express the homage due to him. The answer pleased God exceedingly, and thus did he teach all earthly kings by his divine example to undertake naught without first consulting advisors. I mean, what a load of rot. The Torah, or the law of God, is now a being who's female. He associated mercy with justice and made them to rule jointly. Thus, from the beginning of all things prevailed divine goodness, without which nothing could have continued to exist. One of the most remarkable creatures is the man of the mountain, Adni Sada, or briefly Adam. His form is exactly that of a human being, but he is fastened to the ground by means of a navel string upon which his life depends. The cord once snapped, he dies. The animal keeps himself alive with what is produced by the soil around about him as far as his tether permits him to crawl. Sounds a bit like the serpent or Satan crawling in the dust of the earth. No creature may venture to approach within the radius of his cord, for he seizes and demolishes whatever comes in his reach. To kill him, one may not go near to him. The navel string must be severed from a distance by means of a dart. And then he dies amid groans and moans. Once upon a time, a traveller happened in the region where this animal was found. He overheard his host consult his wife as to what to do to honour their guest, and resolved to serve our man as he said. Thinking he had fallen among cannibals, the stranger ran as fast as his feet could carry him from his entertainer, who sought vainly to restrain him. Afterwards he found out that there had been no intention of regaling him with human flesh, but only with the flesh of the strange animal called man. As the man of the mountain is fixed to the ground by his navel string, so the barnacle goose is grown to a tree by its bill. I mean, who wrote this? It's insane. It is hard to say whether it is an animal and must be slaughtered to be fit for food, or whether it is a plant and no ritual ceremony is necessary before eating it. So when we see albums like this from Kate Bush, King of the Mountain, the whole term King of the Mountain comes from the Kabbalah or the Talmud. And if we look at this picture of Kate Bush, she has some mighty powerful shoulders there and narrow hips. Here she is as a child, perhaps a little boy. And is she one of these Baphomet creations? Kate Bush, the man with the child in his eyes. Is she trying to tell us something here? Is she King of the Mountain? We have perhaps the King of the Mountain depicted in the Pearl Jam song Jeremy. Daddy didn't give attention to the fact that Mummy didn't care. Mother, father, King Jeremy the Wicked ruled his world. So this story of King of the Mountain leads back to Mount Meru, also known as Sumeru, is a sacred five-peaked mountain in Hindu, Jain and Buddhist cosmology, and is considered to be the center of the physical, metaphysical and spiritual universe. Many famous Buddhist, Jain and Hindu temples have been built as symbolic representations of this mountain. The Sumeru throne style base is a common feature of Chinese pagodas. The highest point on the Phat Hat, a Burmese-style multi-tiered roof, represents Mount Meru. And we have Mount Meru in the North Pole, in the center of Hyperborea, or the perhaps pre-flood world. The King of the Mountain, Adam, and the four rivers flowing out of Eden. Is this in the North Pole? Is Mount Meru referring to the antediluvian world and Adam? So according to the legend of the Jews and the Talmudic Kabbalistic teachings, the first Adam was both male and female, as they say, in the image of God. He created them. It says here in Louis Ginsberg's The Legends of the Jews, the woman destined to become the true companion of man was taken from Adam's body, for only when like is joined unto like, the union is indissoluble. The creation of woman from man was possible because Adam originally had two faces, which were separated at the birth of Eve. So this is where this rebus image is coming from. It's from Kabbalistic teachings. And we can see here that the rebus image is the same as the Baphomet image. We've got a sun on this side, we've got a moon on this side, and we have this 8-pointed Inanna Venus star in the middle, which represents the rebus, or the first Adam, with two faces before he became Adam and Eve. And, the one side of the sun is the male side, the one side of the moon is the female side, and he's standing on top of a pyramid or the mountain. Is he king of the mountain? Another depiction of this two-faced being is the Janus face. So in ancient Roman religion, the myth Janus is the god of beginnings, gates, transitions, time, duality, doorways, passages, frames, and endings. He is usually depicted as having two faces. The month of January is named for Janus. So gates and duality, doorways, and we have Jacob's ladder, or the gateway to heaven. So according to the Kabbalistic teaching, the Jacob's ladder story starts here in the Legend of the Jews. Jacob's journey to Haran was a succession of miracles. The first of the 5 that befell for his sake in the course of it was that the sun sank while Jacob was passing Mount Moriah. Though it was high noon at the time, he was following the spring that appeared wherever the patriarchs went or settled. It accompanied Jacob from Beersheba to Mount Moriah, a 2-day journey. When he arrived at the holy hill, the Lord said to him, Jacob, thou hast bread in thy wallet, and the spring of waters is nearby to quench thy thirst. Thus thou hast food and drink, and here thou canst lodge for the night. But Jacob replied, the sun has barely passed the 5th of the 12-day stages. Why should I lie down to sleep at so unseemly an hour? But then Jacob perceived that the sun was about to sink, and he prepared to make ready his bed. It was the divine purpose not to let Jacob pass the site of the future temple without stopping. He was to tarry there at least one night. Also God desired to appear unto Jacob, and he shows himself unto his faithful one only at night. At the same time, Jacob was saved from the pursuit of Esau, who had to desist on account of the premature darkness. So we have here this Mount Moriah, the temple, king of the mountain, maybe king of the temple. Jacob took 12 stones from the altar on which his father Isaac had laid bound as a sacrifice, and he said, it was the purpose of God to let 12 tribes arise, but they have not been begotten by Abraham or Isaac. If now these 12 stones will unite into a single one, then shall I know for a certainty that I am destined to become the father of the 12 tribes. At this time the second miracle came to pass. The 12 stones joined themselves together and made one, which he put under his head, and at once it became soft and downy like a pillow. And, we have this stone of scone, which is said to be Jacob's pillow, and the throne of the UK, or the British royal throne. The kings are throned on the stone of scone. And is this depicting that they have power as king of the temple, the king of the mountain, over the 12 tribes of Israel, or the Hebrews, not just Judah, as they say they are descendants from? It was well that he had a comfortable couch. He was in great need of rest, for it was the first night in 14 years that he had not kept vigils. During those years passed in Eber's house of learning, he had devoted the nights to study, and for 20 years to come he was not to sleep. For while he was with his uncle Laban, he spent all night and every night reciting the Psalms. Wow, here's a man for 20 years who didn't sleep. On the whole, it was a night of marvels. He dreamed a dream in which the course of the world's history was unfolded to him. On a ladder set up on the earth, with the top of it reaching to heaven, he beheld the two angels who had been sent to Sodom. For 138 years they had been banished from the celestial regions because they had betrayed their secret mission to Lot. They had accompanied Jacob from his father's house thither, and now they were ascending heavenward. When they arrived there, he heard them call to other angels and say, "Come ye and see the countenance of the pious Jacob, whose likeness appears on the divine throne." There we go. So Jacob's likeness appears on the divine throne. You who yearn long to see it. And then he beheld angels descended from heaven to gaze upon him. He also saw the angels of the four kingdoms ascending the ladder. The angel of Babylon mounted 70 rounds, the angel of Media 52, that of Greece 180, and that of Edom mounted very high, saying, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." And Jacob heard a voice remonstrating, "Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the utmost parts of the pit." God himself reproved Edom, saying, "Though thou mount on high as the eagle, and though thy nest be set among the stars, I will bring thee down from thence." So here we have Edom, Esau, being depicted as being cast from heaven like Satan. And in Revelation, we have the dragon being cast out of heaven, taking a third of the stars with him. Is this where they're getting this story from? Furthermore, God showed unto Jacob the revelation of Mount Sinai, the translation of Elijah, the temple in his glory, and its spoliation. Nebuchadnezzar's attempt to burn the three holy children in the fiery furnace, and Daniel's encounter with Baal. This is the first prophetic dream dreamed by Jacob. God made him the promise that the land upon which he was lying would be given to him, but the land he lay upon was the whole of Palestine, which God had foretold together and put under him. And the promise continued, "Thy seed will be like unto the dust of the earth, and as the earth survives all things, so thy children will survive all the nations of the earth. But as the earth is trodden upon by all, so thy children, when they commit trespasses, will be trodden upon by the nations of the earth." And furthermore, God promised that Jacob should spread out to the west and to the east, a greater promise than that given to his fathers Abraham and Isaac, to whom he had allotted a limited land. Jacob was an unbound possession. Now, it's kind of interesting too, referring back to the stone of scone, that Jacob's descendants should inherit the land of Palestine. And today we have the Israeli nation and people imposing on the people of Palestine, taking this land off them. And, you know, we have this British royalty in with the Rothschild family and the Balfour Declaration gaining possession of this land. And, you know, if we look at this in terms of symbolism, we have the crown crowned on the stone of scone, being the king of the 12 tribes of Israel, taking back this land, Palestine. Does this guy here, or does this family here, think that perhaps they are the image of Jacob and that they are the king over the 12 tribes of Israel? And if we notice, he's wearing a lot of 8-pointed stars there, perhaps declaring himself as the Inanna god, goddess. So in this Daily Mail article, we have an A to Z to the coronation of King Charles, not my king. And what's really interesting is it goes through all the different rituals they have. Here we have this ampulla. Charles will be anointed with holy oil, but this is the king we're talking about, so he can't just be drizzled on like a lettuce leaf. Instead, the oil will be poured from a vessel called the ampulla. Pictured, it's the shape of a golden eagle designed in 1661 by royal goldsmith Sir Robert Vayner. The head is removable and there's an opening in the beak for pouring, a bit like one half of a very fancy 400-year-old oil and vinegar set. Now they're speaking tongue-in-cheek here, obviously, but if we look at this time period, 1661, it's around the time of the first King Charles and the reinstating of his son, King Charles II. Now, I recommend going and watching the recent video by Truthstream Media on King Charles, and it's made a lot of connections here with what's actually going on with King Charles, and perhaps maybe he's the Dragon King, or King of the Dragon and Gog-Magog, the City of London banking district. And I think the royal family has covertly been behind these Rothschilds and these bankers all along. We have the establishment of the City of London in around 1666, when after the Fire of London. The story of King Charles I, King Charles II, Oliver Cromwell, all that time period is really interesting, and I think Truthstream Media do a really good job of explaining the ramifications for us today from what happened in that time period. There's a few things I want to point out in this article about the coronation. Number one, this ring. We have this St. George's cross. This St. George's cross is the symbol of the dragon of the City of London. Here it was made for Queen Victoria, fourth finger. Sometimes called the nation's wedding ring, the sovereign ring, pictured right, featuring diamonds, sapphires, and rubies, is placed on the fourth or ring finger of the right hand of the monarch as a symbol of kingly dignity. There wasn't much dignity for poor Queen Victoria, whose specially designed ring was mistakenly made for her little finger. The Archbishop had to force it onto her fourth finger, which she described as very painful. Let's hope the makers of Charles's ring take his sausage fingers into consideration. We have the St. George's cross. England has the St. George's cross on their flag, and this ancient symbol goes all the way back to Georgia, back to the Star of Inanna. Here's another reference back to being the king of Israel, Nathan the prophet. Perhaps not the most familiar of prophets, but next May he's going to be name-checked by Archbishop of Canterbury in front of millions of TV viewers around the world. During the anointing of the king, the Archbishop will recall as Solomon was anointed king by Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet. So here we have this link to being the king of Israel, and we have this link to being the king of Freemasonry, also the Solomon's Temple system. We have here the Stone of Destiny, Stone of Scone. So I've gone into that. Now, what was really interesting here for me, because I've spoken a lot about Zoroastrianism, it says here, as King Charles is defender of the faith, but in keeping with his wishes to modernize and diversify the monarchy, he wishes to embrace all religions. He is said to have a special affinity for Zoroastrianism, an Iranian religion based on the teaching of the prophet Zoroaster. Malcolm Debu represented the Zoroastrian community at the Queen's funeral and may have a more prominent role in the King's coronation. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Hitler, and people believe that he was doing the right thing and had been framed for being a madman by the Jewish elite. But, when we live in this Hegelian world, and my beef with Hitler is that he sided with the Roman Catholic Church. And I think that anyone who had any idea of what was going on would never have done that, and it was his downfall for sure. And then there's the stories that Hitler may possibly be a illegitimate son of Rothschild banking elite. But nonetheless, there was some interesting symbology in the Nazi Party, and we have the association with the British royal family and the Nazi Party. So in this book by Nicholas Goodrick Clark, The Occult Roots of Nazism, Secret Aryan Cults and Their Influence on Nazi Ideology. I won't go into this much because it probably is worth its own investigation. But, we have a lot of this Zoroastrian symbolism here. The eagle, the swastika, which is, the winged disc of the Zoroastrian religion. So the modern German occult revival from 1880 to 1910. Occultism has its basis in a religious way of thinking, the roots of which stretch back into antiquity and which may be described as the Western esoteric tradition. Its principal ingredients have been identified as Gnosticism, the Hermetic treatises on alchemy and magic, Neoplatonism, and the Kabbalah, all originated in the Eastern Mediterranean area during the first few centuries AD. Gnosticism properly refers to the beliefs of certain heretical sects among the Christians that claim to possess gnosis, or special esoteric knowledge of spiritual matters. Although their various doctrines differed in many respects, two common Gnostic themes exist. First, an Oriental Persian dualism, according to which the two realms of good and evil, light and darkness, order and chaos, are viewed as independent battling principles. And second, the conviction that the material world is utterly evil, so that man can be saved only by attaining the gnosis of the higher realm. The Gnostic sects disappeared in the 4th century, but their ideas inspired the dualistic Manichaean religion of the 2nd century and also the Hermetica. These Greek texts were composed in Egypt between the 3rd and 5th centuries and developed a synthesis of Gnostic ideas, Neoplatonism, and Kabbalistic theosophy. Since these mystical doctrines arose again a background of cultural and social change, a correlation has been noted between the proliferation of the sects and breakdown of the stable agriculture order of the late Roman Empire. Now we know that Roman Catholicism is based on these Gnostic teachings as well. Roman Catholicism is a dualistic religion, and it is also full of mystery religion principles. Germany boasted several renowned scholar magicians in the Renaissance, and a number of secret societies devoted to Rosicrucianism, theosophy, and alchemy also flourished there from the 17th to the 19th centuries. However, the impetus for the neo-romantic occult revival of the 19th century did not arise in Germany. It is attributable rather to the reaction against the reign of the materialist, rationalist, and positivist ideas in the utilitarian and industrial cultures of America and England. The modern German occult revival owes its inception to the popularity of theosophy in the Anglo-Saxon world during the 1880s, where theosophy refers to the international sectarian movement deriving from the activities and writings of the Russian adventuress and occultist Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, 1831-91. Her colourful life and travels in the 1850s and 1860s, her clairvoyant powers, and penchant for supernatural phenomenon in her interest in American spiritualism during the 1870s, following her foundation of the Theosophical Society in New York in 1875 and the subsequent removal of the operations to India between 1879 and 1885 have all been fully documented in several biographies. Here the essentials of theosophy as a doctrine will be surmised before tracing its penetration of Central Europe. Now, Blavatsky was born in the Ukraine. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, often known as Madame Blavatsky, she was Ukrainian, was a Russian mystic and author who co-founded the Theosophical Society. Born into an aristocratic family of Russian-German descent, she was a Ukrainian Jew. To prove this, Madame Blavatsky's maiden name was von Hahn, H-A-H-N. In this issue of Vancouver Holocaust Education, we're speaking about a German Jewish family here. The Hahns, the life of Max and Gertrude, H-A-H-N. Drawing on the riches in the boxes, Hayden shared his grandparents' story. The life of Max and Gertrude Hahn was one of cultured and civilized elegance. They lived in Göttingen, a city of intellect whose scientists had earned many Nobel Prizes. Family life was warm. For Max's 50th birthday, my father and aunt dressed as Meissen porcelain to honor one of Max's many collecting passions. My grandfather was a deep collector, and his Judaica collection was considered equal to those of Sassoon and Rothschild. Max was a successful businessman and entrepreneur. He was Jewish, and he shared a surname with Madame Helena Blavatsky nee von Hahn. She was Jewish, Blavatsky was Jewish, and Jewish men did not marry non-Jewish women. Here in an article written by John L. Crow, he mentions that when examining the history of Nazi occultism, one quickly finds that the domain is a confusing muddle of influences, connections, and ideological transmissions. Within this morass, it is difficult to draw lines of direct connection. Yet, if one is persistent over time, certain names, organizations, and documents consistently emerge as influential on a wide spectrum of participants. One of these figures is Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, 1831 to 1891, or better known as Madame Blavatsky. Blavatsky was the co-founder of the occult organization, the Theosophical Society, which was initially created in 1875 in New York City, but shortly after relocated its headquarters to India. In 1888, Blavatsky published her magnum opus, the 2 volumes of the Secret Doctrine. She outlines a new vision for humanity's evolution, one that places the Aryans at the top of a race hierarchy. She claimed these revelations came from occult sources and would form various German occult organizations, which in turn would later inform the racial theories of Nazism. At the beginning of the 12th century, there were a myriad of racial theories circulating throughout Europe, all of which had their antecedents in the 19th century. A common link for these theories was an innate anti-Semitism that kept Jewish race separate and denigrated. Now, I don't think it's separated and denigrated, because why would they keep the Jewish people denigrated when this whole philosophy has come about from a woman who herself was Jewish? There's evidence now from cuneiform tablets from Babylon that the bankers of Babylon were so-called, inverted commas, Jewish bankers. These banking families go all the way back to Babylon and the Silk Road trade. And I think that what happened in the First and Second World War was a sacrifice of the lesser classes that they considered a worthy sacrifice for their agenda, and that Nazism had an agenda to force Jews back to Palestine, obviously, and establish this kingdom of Israel again. There's method in their madness, and it's a Hegelian game. There's no one right side here. Within occult circles in Germany and Austria, theosophical theories of race and human evolution were intermingled with pan-Germanic nationalism, anti-Semitism, and nostalgic appeals to a Germanic heritage prior to Christianity. And I can't help but think of the Uralinda book here when we have Helena Blavatsky's version of creation, starting with the polar race, which is number one, created in fire. And in the Uralinda, we have the three maidens, Lyda out of fierce heat, Finda out of strong heat, and Freya out of moderate heat. And, is this referring back to this Kabbalistic version of creation? They killed two birds with one stone with this philosophy. In one word, they could get away with whatever they wanted in the name of anti-Semitism. In the other, they established their Balfour Declaration and moved back into Palestine, and it re-established the Kingdom of Israel. And their next agenda is to re-establish the Silk Road, the Belt and Road Project. This potent cocktail of ideas were consumed heavily by various groups such as the German Order of the Thule Society and promoted by Ariosophists such as Guido von List and George Lanz von Liebenfels. Together, these individuals and organizations laid the foundation for a variety of ideas that informed Nazi race theory and contributed to the Nazi Holocaust. Well, when we look at World War II, there were far more Allied nation men and women and people in Europe murdered in the name of this bankers' war. In the Apologetics of the Theosophical Society from the editor's desk was H.P. Blavatsky, a Nazi. And it says, it's probably time to revisit an old and touchy issue. Did H.P. Blavatsky's ideas about race-inspired Nazis? If you pour through the internet, you may go away thinking so. Here's one example. H.P.'s saddest and most horrifying accomplishment was being the spiritual impetus for the Nazi regime decades after her death. Many German occultists and racists embraced Blavatsky's idea of being descended from Aryan godmen and her anti-Semitism. I don't think it's anti-Semitism. I think it's anti-everybody. Basically this is an elitist system. We have these elitists, the German royal family. Queen Victoria and her husband could barely speak English, and yet they're German rulers of the United Kingdom. Not only that, I think they were German court Jewish elite. These people have an elitist belief, and they think that they are descendants of gods and kings. They're happy to sacrifice a few Jews in concentration camps, and they're happy to sacrifice most of Europe. They don't care, and we look at these green agendas today, and they're happy to sacrifice 90% of humanity for their elitist Blavatsky agendas, 7 root races. In the 18th century, scholars began to see that Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, among other languages, shared so many common roots that they all had to be descended from the same language. Modern linguists call it Proto-Indo-European or simply Indo-European. In the 19th century, however, this ancestral language was given another name from the Sanskrit word Arya, meaning noble. This language started to be called Aryan. Scholars then concluded that the people who spoke this language were a distinct race from which Europeans, Iranians, and Indians were descended. This may or may not have been the case and cannot be proven with the evidence we now have. The next step was to assume that this noble Aryan race was superior to all others, particularly in Germany. This took the form of claiming that the pure Aryans were the white, blonde, blue-eyed specimens. These were superior to the dark people as well as to the Jews, who as Semites were thought to come from a different stock. So how did Blavatsky come to be identified with this movement? She and her teachers did speak of an Aryan root race, the 5th root race, a primordial stock that goes back 1,000,000 years. The Mahatma root Kut Humi writes, the highest people now on earth spiritually belong to the first sub-race of the 5th root race, and those are the Aryan Asiatics, the Indians. The highest race, physically, intellectually, is the last sub-race of the 5th, yourselves, the White Conquerors, Mahatma Letters, Chronicle edition 312, emphasis in the original here and in the quotes. Is this why they're now attacking the Western white European nations? Is this why they want to change our genetics, because the fifth root race is over and now we need to bring in the sixth and the seventh race via these genetic altering scientific technologies? It sounds as if the Aryan root race, born and developed in the far north, Secret Doctrine 2768, is a Caucasian race which would include most of the Indians of Asia as well as the white Europeans and their descendants. It's probably no coincidence that these people mostly speak Indo-European languages. So we have this whole concept coming from the teachings of this Jewish occultist, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And, we've got these British royal family who were clearly in with the Nazi party, Prince Philip. Now we've got King Charles III, and they are pushing these green agendas on the world based on these Aryan root race beliefs, that they are somehow more deserving of life than anybody else, and they are destined to rule. And this comes from the Babylonian Mystery religion of Kabbalah, which then moved to Iran, Assyria, this Zoroastrian dualistic religion, and it's as old as time itself. We can always pinpoint any of these beliefs down to the one thing, and it's Babylonian Mystery religion. So just finally, to prove my point on this Blavatsky root race evolution of humanity to the sixth race, I'll just read from Yuval Noah Harari. And it says, when Yuval Noah Harari published his first book, Sapiens, in 2014 about the history of the human species, it became a global bestseller and turned the little-known Israeli history professor into one of the most popular writers and thinkers on the planet. But when we met with Harari in Tel Aviv this summer, it wasn't our species past that concerned him. It was our future. Harari believes we may be on the brink of creating not just a new enhanced species of human, but an entirely new kind of being, one that is far more intelligent than we are. It sounds like science fiction, but Yuval Noah Harari says it's actually much more dangerous than that. No, it doesn't sound like science fiction. It sounds like Madame Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophy Society's Luciferian doctrine. Now, when we look at the actual story in Genesis, it says, and Jacob went from Beersheba and went to Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set upon the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascended and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. Okay, so not to some seat of Jacob. What does it say? Come and see the countenance of the pious Jacob, whose likeness appears on the divine throne. God said he'll give it to Jacob's seed, and according to the Bible, Jacob's seed and Abraham's seed will be as the sand of the seashore here, and thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in thee and in thy seed shall all families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and I will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and bring thee again into the land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. And Jacob awakened out of his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place. This is none other but the house of God. And this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was called Luz at the first. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, a raiment to put on it, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee. Now, it says nothing here about Mount Moriah or setting up a temple. When we look here in Ginsberg's The Legend of the Jews, it says these 12 stones from Abraham. There's nothing about 12 stones that Abraham put on the altar, that he was to sacrifice Isaac. And there's nothing about Mount Moriah. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was called Luz. Now, if we have a look at a map where this Luz or Bethel is, it says Bethel, house of God, literally a town near the place where Abraham halted and offered sacrifice on his way south from Shechem. At the top of the ascent from the Jordan Valley by way of it lay south of Shiloh. It is named as on the northern border of Benjamin. The town was originally called Luz when Jacob came hither on his way. So Bethel was the royal city of the Canaanites. So is Bethlehem Bethel? So Bethlehem means house of bread, house of war, from the noun Beth, house, and Lahem, both to war and to eat. There are two towns named Bethlehem mentioned in the Bible, the famous one in Judah, the one in Zebulun, Joshua 19:15. Bethlehem, Judah is first mentioned as the place formerly known as Ephrath in Genesis 35, where Rachel gives birth to Benjamin and dies. Bethlehem's rise to stardom is set in motion by Elimelech. The Bethlehemite note that this frequently occurring ethnonym is spelled with a maquep or hyphen only in 1 Samuel 16:1, but always comes with the particle of motion, he, who finds himself and his family driven out of Israel and to Moab by a famine in Ruth 1:1-2. His wife's name Naomi, his son are Mahalon and Chilion, and his Moabite daughter-in-law are Ruth and Orpah. When after 10 years all the men are dead, Orpah goes home and Naomi goes back to Bethlehem and takes Ruth with her. In Bethlehem, Ruth meets and marries Boaz. Their son is Obed, the father of Jesse, the father of David, who will be the king who unites the tribes of Israel. It is for this reason that Micah writes the Messianic prophecy referred to in Matthew 2:6. So Jesus is the root of an offspring of David and Jesse, and his ancestors met in Bethlehem. But as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, who little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. We're talking about Jesus here. Jesus is the temple, his body is the temple, and he is the king of the mountain, not someone throned on the stone of scone. Perhaps he should have left it a surprise, because some 700 years later, King Herod, fearing rivalry from an infant, has all the children of Bethlehem and environs murdered. Matthew revealed how far those environs stretched by referring to what Jeremiah wrote 100 years after Micah. Thus saith Yahweh, a voice is heard in Ramah, Rachel is weeping for her children. Rachel's tomb is somewhere in the border of Benjamin. 1 Samuel 10:2, and Ramah is in Benjamin town, north of Jerusalem. In 1 Chronicles 2:5-1, it reads that Salma was the father of Bethlehem, and it seems that Bethlehem is a person. However, this Bethlehem is mentioned along groups of people and towns, and it is much more likely that Salma was a mayor of the town of Bethlehem, Judah. Something similar happened in Tekoa in 1 Chronicles 2:24. In 2 Chronicles 11:6, we see both these towns as built by Rehoboam. That means either that these existing towns were fortified, or Rehoboam erected new forts with old nostalgic names. The name Bethlehem is written about in Maquette in Genesis and Judges and on, but sporadically in Samuel, Chronicles and the Prophets. It occurs spelled with Maquette, occurs a mere 8 times in the New Testament. So Bethlehem is on the border of, or in the northern border of Benjamin. So here we have Bethel, the northern border of, it's in Ephraim, and Benjamin here. Bethlehem is said to be south of Jerusalem. Let's face it, neither of them are anywhere near Jerusalem where the temple was built, Mount Moriah. So we have Bethel here north of Jerusalem. We have Bethlehem south of Jerusalem. I personally believe that when this place was called Bethel, that it's referring to where Jesus was born, the temple of God, Jacob's ladder to heaven, is Jesus born in Bethlehem. And there's a lot of contention as to where Luz and Bethel actually are. And the modern day city isn't necessarily the one that Jacob was referring to.
Your Majesty, the Commonwealth of Nations globe